Taiwan as far as bracing up for warfare is concerned. Ambassador Parthasarathy, whether it's the pressure of midterm elections or sealing her own legacy, do you think Nancy Pelosi has had her own ulterior motives behind this trip, or was this just about showing US solidarity towards Taiwan?
Look, she is an extremely smart politician.
That I agree.
A typical Californian liberal. And she was also a very firm-willed person. Now, she has obviously had very close links with the Chinese Taiwan population in California, because I visit the place quite often. There are large Chinese Taiwanese. That there is that measure of the sort of, you can say, a sense of duty for her constituents who have always voted for her. The ethnic communities always vote Democrat, and certainly for a person like her, it will be 100%. So it's mixed feelings at her age, and I'm not sure she'll come back for another term even. But I don't think anyone can take Taiwan to be a pushover. Let us be quite clear. What the Chinese have done is got Russian equipment and sought to upgrade it. Now, in technology terms, I don't think there's anything to match what the Americans have on offer, and I'm sure their offers to Taiwan would have been at their best. So it is speculative, but I think China will be very, very careful that it does not hurt itself in the eyes of the world, because it will be seen like a big bully taking on a smaller sort of person. And therefore, this is rather speculative, but don't underestimate Taiwan. And I want to tell you one thing. Technologically, and I've been to Taiwan, they are far more advanced than the Chinese.
Right.
I mean, the way they've gone about their semiconductor industry is something to be shown to the world, and there's much which India can learn from it. So I think all this is much speculation. One is quite from the very beginning.
Right.
The American.
All right. Ambassador Parthasarathy, I think you're freezing over there. If you could just look into your connectivity. James Dorsey, if I may quickly come to you right now. You heard what Ambassador Parthasarathy had to say. Do you think that Nancy Pelosi had sort of sensed that prudent stand that China would like to take if this visit were to materialize, that of course has already materialized? And how do you counter the assessment that Taiwan is having to pay for Nancy Pelosi's visit?
Well, I think, first of all, in terms of Pelosi's motives, she's always been a hardliner on China. And she certainly, I would assume, would have wanted to shape U.S. policy. And keep in mind that the responses to the Pelosi visit coming out of Washington have been varied. On the one hand, you've had the Pentagon being quoted as saying that they don't favor the visit. You've had the White House basically first hedging its bets and then trying to repair damage or clarify by actually, for one of the very few times, emphasizing that the United States does not favor Taiwanese independence. And of course, you had Pelosi going forward with the visit. I think one thing to keep in mind is, in terms of contextualizing, if you wish, the Chinese response to the Pelosi visit, is the fact that China, for several years now, has basically acted as a bully. With other words, the language it uses when it criticizes other countries is the one of a stern teacher talking to his pupil rather than talking to an equal. It has economically sanctioned countries like Australia, like Sweden, like Lithuania, the Czech Republic for policies that it did not like. So, first of all, it's an interference in the domestic affairs of multiple countries, and it's a policy of intimidation.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing on a much greater scale in the response to the Pelosi
Absolutely.
visit.
And that is not just something we are now observing in Taiwan. There's something we've already seen what's happened in Hong Kong. Andrew, do you think that we are, as far as Taiwan's concerned, they will go down the same way as Hong Kong, or it's actually the policy that was towards Hong Kong that was not the case in Taiwan, which will actually salvage Taiwan? And then I'm going to actually come to you and talk about these targeted measures that are being adopted by China. But first, I'd like you to answer that.
Well, as far as interference and intimidation are concerned, I think it would be ironic for these criticisms coming from another even more aggressive country interfering in China's internal affairs like Hong Kong and Xinjiang, and also intimidation in terms of the military exercises and so-called freedom of navigations at the front door of China's territorial waters. But anyway, be that as it may, I don't think that there is also a fear in Beijing that there is a trap to provoke China into taking premature action, knowing, as I was referring to Mark Milley's military assessment, that China is not fully ready. So the window to cause any severe damage to China's trajectory is to provoke China into doing something rash. And I don't think that Beijing would fall for this trap. Now, as far as the solution of the Taiwan question is concerned, Beijing has repeatedly emphasized that peaceful unification is the ideal solution. And that's, of course, Sun Tzu's art of war. Now, how to achieve that, of course, is very difficult because most Taiwanese don't want unification. Neither do they want independence because they know for sure that any declaration of independence would bring havoc to Taiwan. So they just want to maintain the status quo forever. However, forever is not the answer for Beijing because President Xi Jinping has set a deadline of 2049 for peaceful unification, ideally, which is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China.
But now, Andrew, I'm sorry to interject, but we're talking about peaceful reunification. Just yesterday or a day before, we've seen China's state mouthpiece, Global Times, talking about speeding up the reunification process, and it looked very angry as far as that entire write-up is concerned. So I don't know if that makes sense if we are going to talk about a peaceful reunification with Taiwan.
No, well, I don't believe every word that Global Times says. For example,
well, you may counter, but the fact is, it is the state.
Yeah. Well, let me finish. Okay. I think that the peaceful solution is not a pipe dream. I would use the Hong Kong reversion of sovereignty as an example. Now, before this return of Hong Kong to the motherland was first bruited, there was a great deal of unease in Hong Kong, myself included. I mean, who knows? I mean, so because the Hong Kong has been governed under a different system, and for Hong Kong to be returned to China, of course, there was the society, the businesses, and they're all up in a great turmoil. And of course, that the governing power at that time was Margaret Thatcher, an Iron Lady. Obviously, she won't she'll resist that. But at the end, that's what happened: peaceful return of Hong Kong to the motherland. And then through all these years, the 25 years, and I have learned that it's no. Of course, it's different from before, but at least...
Andrew, I'm sorry, I'm running short of time. I have to also pose questions to my other guests. Ting Ting, if I may come to you, there's talk about China's reliance on different ways that are short of war, but how they are measured in very specific, targeted measures that can be a great pressure tactic on Taiwan and can also be used to undermine U.S. support towards Taiwan. Do you view China resorting to more of these so-called grey zone tactics instead of more military incursions?
No, I mean, this is a tactic that has actually been closely observed, employed by the PLA over the past few years. I think one thing that is key to note is that on top of all the PLA jet incursions that has been widely reported, like how the jets have been flying to Taiwan's air defense identification zone, there are actually reports in Taiwan where we know that on the, let's say, the the islands off, the outer islands around Taiwan, let's say the Taiping Islands and also the Spratly Islands, those areas basically for Taiwan, what happened is that there has been reports of like normal fishing vessels, surrounding this islands, and then that may actually seem like a gray zone tactic. And on top of that, just before the exercises commenced recently around Taiwan,
Right.
We have been receiving daily reports of unmanned aerial vehicles, technically drones, basically flying over outer islands of Taiwan, and then these are gray zone tactics because you do not know where this kind of vessels belongs
Right.
to. You also do not know where these UAVs belong to, but they are definitely from the PLA or maybe definitely from the PRC government. So in that sense, there are not many cards for Taiwan to play at this hand
Right.
because it is gray zone tactic and there may be a risk of miscalculation.
James, as far